Her name is Sophie Mitchell, and she lives a life balanced on a knife's edge. Every dollar is counted, every hour is sacred, and every shift is a battle for survival. What happens when she's faced with an impossible choice, protect herself or save a struggling colleague? She chooses kindness, a decision that pushes her to the brink of ruin, forcing her into the longest, most grueling day of her life. She has no idea that in the corner booth, a forgotten man is watching her every move. He isn't just any customer. He's the unseen hand that owns everything, and he's about to change her life in a way she could never, ever imagine. The 5:15 a.m. alarm was less a gentle awakening and more a brutal summons. For Sophie Mitchell, it was the daily starting pistol for a race she felt she was perpetually losing. She slapped the snooze button, once a small, defiant luxury, before forcing her aching body out of the lumpy mattress. The small apartment she shared with her younger brother Leo was quiet, cloaked in the pre-dawn grey of the city. Leo was the sun around which her world orbited. At 17, he should have been worried about prom dates and college applications. Instead, his life was a timetable of medications and doctor's appointments. A rare autoimmune disorder had targeted his kidneys, and the fight to keep him healthy was a relentless, soul-crushingly expensive war. Their parents were gone. A car accident years ago had left them orphans, and Sophie, at just 24, had become a parent, a provider, and a nurse all in one. She moved through the small kitchen with a practiced, weary efficiency. She packed Leo's lunch for school, ensuring his low-sodium diet was strictly followed. She laid out his morning pills next to a glass of water on the nightstand. He was still asleep, his breathing a soft, reassuring rhythm in the quiet. She paused, her hand hovering over his forehead, brushing back a lock of sandy brown hair. "Just hold on, Leo. I'll figure it out. I always do." The promise felt heavier each day. Her job was at the Gilded Spoon, a bistro in the city's upscale financial district. It was a place of polished wood, soft jazz, and the quiet clinking of expensive silverware. It tried to cultivate an air of old-world charm, but for the staff, it was a high-pressure machine that ran on speed precision and the iron-fisted rule of their manager, Mr. David Henderson. The bus ride was her only moment of peace. She'd lean her head against the cool glass, watching the city wake up, a book of poetry open in her lap, but her mind miles away, calculating. The latest specialist copay, $250. The new prescription, $410. The rent stubbornly, mercilessly was due next week. Her wages from the Gilded Spoon, plus the tips she fought for with a genuine smile and tireless service, were stretched so thin they were transparent. She arrived 15 minutes early, as always. Her uniform, a crisp black blouse, black slacks, and a starched white apron, was immaculate. She tied her dark hair back into a severe, practical bun. Looking in the staff locker mirror, she saw the faint, purple smudges under her eyes. She forced a smile. It was her armor. "Mitchell, you're early." "Good. The front patio needs a full wipe down before the morning rush. The dew left water spots everywhere." Mr. Henderson's voice cut through the air before he even entered the locker room. He was a man whose posture seemed permanently stiffened by disapproval. Thin, with a meticulously combed-over hairstyle that did little to hide his balding scalp, he viewed his staff not as people, but as components in his perfectly run machine. Any faulty component was to be reprimanded or replaced. "Yes, Mr. Henderson." On it, Sophie replied, her voice carefully neutral. The morning unfolded in its usual controlled chaos. Sophie moved like a phantom between tables, her memory a steel trap of orders, allergies, and special requests. She refilled coffee cups before they were empty, offered extra napkins to a mother with a messy toddler, and laughed at a businessman's terrible joke. Every smile, every polite nod was a transaction aimed at earning a few extra dollars for Leo. Her closest work friend was Jenna Martinez, a single mother of two who worked the adjacent section. Jenna had a warm, infectious laugh that even Mr. Henderson couldn't completely stifle, though he often tried. "Slow morning, thank God," Jenna whispered as they passed each other by the coffee station. "My youngest Maria was up all night with a fever. I think I'm running on fumes and caffeine." "I know the feeling," Sophie said with a sympathetic smile. "Is she okay?" "I think it's just a bug, but you know how it is. It's impossible to get a day off. Henderson would probably demand a signed affidavit from the pediatrician." Her words hung in the air, a grimly understood truth. Mr. Henderson treated sick days as personal insults. He'd once made a busboy with a stomach flu clean the grease traps before allowing him to go home. As the lunch rush began to build, Sophie noticed a new customer in her section. An older man, probably in his late 60s, sat alone in the corner booth, the best seat in the house, with a panoramic view of the bustling street. He was dressed simply in a worn tweed jacket and grey slacks, nothing like the usual parade of sharp suits and designer labels. He had a kind, tired face, etched with lines that spoke of a long life, and his eyes, a clear, pale blue, seemed to see everything. He ordered a black coffee and a bowl of oatmeal, and asked to be left alone with his newspaper. Sophie served him with her usual quiet efficiency. She noticed the way he held his cup with both hands, as if to warm them. She saw the slight tremor in his fingers as he turned a page. There was a profound sadness about him, a stillness that was unusual in the frantic energy of the bistro. She made a mental note to check on him, but not to bother him. He looked like a man who wanted to be invisible. The lunch rush was a blur, a party of 12 celebrating a promotion, a couple on a tense first date, the usual demanding regulars. Through it all, Sophie moved with grace and composure, a calm island in a sea of demands. She was just starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, the blissful moment she could clock out and head home to Leo when her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. It was a text from Jenna. SOS. "Maria's fever spiked. 103. I have to take her to urgent care. I tried calling Henderson, but he's not answering. I'm so scared I'm going to get fired. I can't lose this job, Soph." Sophie's heart sank. She looked across the restaurant floor. Mr. Henderson was berating a young hostess near the front door, his voice a low, angry hum. Sophie knew what would happen. Jenna wouldn't be able to get through to him, and when she didn't show up for her evening shift, he would fire her on the spot for a no-call, no-show. For a single mother like Jenna, it would be a catastrophe. Sophie felt the familiar weight of the world settle on her shoulders. Her own shift ended in 20 minutes. She was bone-tired. Her feet throbbed. All she wanted was to go home. But she saw Jenna's terrified face in her mind, thought of her sick little girl, and knew she couldn't just walk away. Taking a deep breath, she walked towards Mr. Henderson, the architect of their daily misery, steeling herself for the battle to come. In the corner booth, the old man lowered his newspaper slightly, his pale blue eyes watching her approach the manager, his expression unreadable. The air around Mr. Henderson was always a few degrees colder. As Sophie approached, he finished his lecture to the young hostess, who looked as if she were about to burst into tears. He turned his pinched, impatient gaze on Sophie. "What is it, Mitchell? You're not on break. Table 7 needs their check and the water glasses at table 9 are empty. Are you not seeing the floor?" "Yes, Mr. Henderson. I'll get to them right away." Sophie said, her voice steady despite the hammering in her chest. "It's about the evening shift. It's about Jenna Martinez." His eyes narrowed into slits. "What about Martinez? She's not due in for another 3 hours. Don't tell me she's trying to get out of her shift. Her daughter Maria is very sick, Sophie explained, keeping her tone respectful and factual. She has a high fever, and Jenna is taking her to urgent care. She tried to call you, but she couldn't get through. Henderson let out a short, derisive scoff. How convenient. A sick daughter. I've heard that one 100 times. It's Friday night, our busiest night. People just don't want to work. It's not like that, Sophie insisted, a spark of defiance flaring within her. Jenna is a good worker. She wouldn't lie about her child. Everyone is replaceable, Mitchell. Her personal problems are not my concern. My concern is this restaurant. If she doesn't show up, her position will be considered abandoned. Tell her that. He made a dismissive gesture, ready to turn away. The cold finality of his words struck Sophie like a physical blow. She thought of Jenna's 2 kids of the cheap, drafty apartment she lived in. Losing this job would push them over the edge. Sophie's own situation was precarious, but Jenna's was a free fall waiting to happen, and in that moment, a decision formed. It wasn't logical. It wasn't sensible. It went against every instinct of self-preservation that screamed at her to go home, rest, and take care of her own problems. But the image of Leo's trusting face and the thought of another child suffering because of a cruel system was too much to bear. It was a reckless, foolish, and deeply human choice. "I'll cover her shift," Sophie said. The words left her mouth before she could fully process their weight. Henderson stopped and turned back, an expression of mild surprise shifting into suspicion. You just finished an 8-hour lunch shift. You want to work another 8 hours?" "Yes," Sophie said, her voice firmer now. "Jenna needs someone to be there for her daughter. The restaurant needs her station covered. I can do it." He studied her for a long moment, not with gratitude, but with a calculating glint in his eye. He wasn't seeing her compassion. He was seeing a solution to his staffing problem. A double shift meant no scrambling to call in a replacement, no disruption to his perfectly managed evening. It was a testament to his management style that an employee would rather work 16 straight hours than face his wrath. "Fine," he said with a curt nod. "But I expect the same level of service you provide during your day shift. No slacking, no excuses about being tired. If your performance drops, I will write you up. You'll take a mandatory 30-minute break between shifts. Clock out, then clock back in. No overtime on the break. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear, Mr. Henderson," Sophie said, a wave of exhaustion washing over her as the reality of her commitment set in. 16 hours on her feet. It would be brutal. "Good. Now go take care of tables 7 and 9. He strode away, already absorbed in his next task, leaving Sophie standing in the middle of the dining room. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick text to Jenna. "Don't worry about work. I'm covering for you. Just focus on Maria. Let me know what the doctor says." Jenna's reply came almost instantly. "Sophie, no. You can't. You'll be exhausted. Henderson will kill you." Sophie typed back, a weary smile touching her lips. He already agreed. "It's fine. Really. Go be a mom. I owe you my life. Thank you." "Thank you." Sophie slipped the phone back into her apron. She caught a flicker of movement from the corner booth. The old man, Mr. Ed, as she had mentally nicknamed him, was watching her. Their eyes met for a brief second. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod before returning to his newspaper. It was a tiny gesture, but in that moment, it felt like a flicker of acknowledgement, a silent recognition of the choice she had just made. She dismissed it as a trick of the light and turned her attention back to the floor, to the empty water glasses, and the waiting check her own problems now postponed by another 8 hours. During her 30-minute break, she didn't rest. She scarfed down a protein bar and 2 glasses of water in the staff room, then spent the remaining 20 minutes on the phone with Leo. He had just gotten home from school. "Hey, kiddo. How was your day?" she asked, trying to keep the exhaustion out of her voice. "It was okay. Mr. Peterson gave us a pop quiz in history. I think I aced it," he said, his voice bright. "Are you on your way home?" Her heart clenched. "Actually, something came up at work. I'm going to be late tonight. Really late. I'm covering a double shift." There was a pause on the other end. "A double Soph, you were already tired this morning. You can't do that." "I'll be fine," she said, forcing a cheerful tone. "It means a little extra for the emergency fund. Right, I left your dinner in the fridge. You just need to microwave it. And don't forget your evening meds. I'll call you when I get my next break." "Okay," he said, though his voice was laced with concern. "Just be careful. Don't push yourself too hard." "I won't. I love you, Leo." "Love you too, Soph." Hanging up the weight felt heavier than ever. It wasn't just about money. It was about the time she was losing with him, the energy she was spending on strangers when he needed her most. She closed her eyes for a single minute, picturing the stack of bills on their kitchen counter. Then she stood up, straightened her apron, and walked back out to the floor. The evening rush was beginning, and her 16-hour marathon had only just begun. The transition from the lunch shift to the dinner shift was like moving from a swift-flowing river into a raging ocean. The soft afternoon light gave way to the dim, intimate glow of evening lamps. The clientele changed too. The brisk, efficient lunch crowd was replaced by patrons who lingered, who ordered multiple courses, and whose expectations were exponentially higher. For them, it was a night of leisure and indulgence. For Sophie, it was the start of an 8-hour tightrope walk over a pit of exhaustion. The first 2 hours were a frantic blur. The restaurant was packed, a symphony of chatter-clinking glasses and the distant clang of pans from the kitchen. Sophie operated on pure muscle memory, her mind a fortress of order numbers, table layouts and dietary restrictions. She was a whirlwind of efficiency, taking orders, delivering plates, clearing tables, all while maintaining the serene, pleasant expression that was the hallmark of her professionalism. Mr. Henderson watched her like a hawk prowling the dining room floor, his eyes missing nothing. He noticed a fork that was slightly askew, a water glass that was only 3/4 full of crumb on the floor. Each time he passed Sophie's section, she could feel his critical gaze, waiting for a single misstep. Around 7:30 p.m., a family was seated in her section. A mother, a father, and 2 young children under the age of 5. They were a tornado of chaos. The toddler threw a menu on the floor, the baby started to wail, and the parents looked frazzled and apologetic. Other diners shot them annoyed glances. Sophie approached with a calm smile. "Don't you worry about a thing," she said to the flustered mother. "Why don't I get some crayons and a coloring sheet for your little artist here? And for the baby, would a few slices of soft bread help?" The mother looked at her with pure, unadulterated gratitude. "Oh, would you thank you so much?" While another waiter might have seen the table as a nuisance, a low-tipping time suck, Sophie saw only a family trying to have a nice meal. She brought the crayons, engaged the toddler in a quick, silly conversation about his drawing of a dinosaur, and even managed to coax a gurgle from the baby. She took their complicated order with patience, ensuring the kitchen knew to rush the children's meals first. From his corner booth where he had remained since lunch, the quiet old man, Mr. Ed, watched the entire exchange. He had ordered a simple dinner of soup and bread. He barely touched it. His attention was fixed on Sophie. He saw her boundless patience. He saw her genuine kindness. He saw her treat the harried family with the same respect and warmth she gave the wealthy couple at the next table, who were ordering the most expensive wine on the menu. An hour later, the inevitable happened. Sophie, juggling a tray laden with 4 entrees, had to pivot sharply to avoid a busboy rushing past. In that split second, her exhausted body betrayed her. Her grip faltered. A heavy ceramic plate holding a $60 dry-aged steak slid precariously. She managed to save it from crashing to the floor, but a cascade of hot au jus splashed down the front of her apron and onto her slacks. It was scalding hot, and she bit back a cry of pain as it seeped through the fabric, burning her skin. Mr. Henderson materialized instantly, as if summoned by the scent of failure. "Mitchell, what is the meaning of this?" he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "You are a mess. This is unprofessional. That is a $60 steak. Do you know the profit margin on that steak?" "I'm sorry, Mr. Henderson," Sophie said through gritted teeth, the pain in her leg flaring. "The busboy came up too fast." "Excuses," he snapped. "There are no excuses for incompetence. Clean yourself up, now, and that $60 will be coming out of your tips for the night." It was a flagrantly illegal policy, but no one dared challenge him. Sophie's heart plummeted. $60. That was more than a day's worth of groceries. It was a significant chunk of a utility bill. To lose it over a simple accident while she was working herself to the bone for his restaurant was a bitter pill to swallow. Without a word, she delivered the remaining plates to her table, her professional smile plastered on her face, and then hurried to the staff bathroom. She peeled off her slacks in a stall, her thigh red and blistered from the burn. She ran cold water over it, the relief immediate but temporary. There was no time for proper first aid. She pulled her soiled slacks back on, took a deep, shuddering breath, and went back to work. From the corner booth, Mr. Ed had seen it all. The near collision, the spill, Henderson's cruel reprimand. He saw Sophie limp slightly as she emerged from the restroom, her smile a little tighter, a little more brittle but still in place. He watched as she continued her shift, never letting her pain or frustration show to the customers. As the night wore on, the waves of exhaustion became tidal. Sophie's feet were numb, her back a knot of searing pain. The burn on her leg throbbed with every step. She felt lightheaded, detached, as if she were watching herself from a distance. She moved on autopilot, fueled by sheer willpower and the thought of Leo. She checked her phone during a brief lull. A new text from Jenna. "Doctor said it's a nasty flu, but she'll be okay. They gave her meds. We're home now. I feel so guilty, Soph. You should be home." Sophie typed back, her fingers clumsy. "So glad she's okay. That's all that matters. Don't feel guilty. We look out for each other. That's what we do." The words gave her a small surge of strength. It was the right thing to do. It had to be. The last tables began to leave around 11:00 p.m. The dining room slowly emptied, leaving behind a battlefield of crumpled napkins and empty glasses. The quiet man in the corner was one of the last to leave. As Sophie approached his table to clear it, he finally spoke to her, his voice softer and kinder than she expected. "You've had a very long day," he said. It wasn't a question. "It's been busy," Sophie replied with a tired but genuine smile. He looked at her, his pale blue eyes, full of an emotion she couldn't quite decipher. It looked like a mixture of sympathy and profound respect. "You handled that family with the children with remarkable grace. And your manager. He seems like a difficult man to work for." Sophie was taken aback by his directness. We all do our best, sir." He placed a surprisingly generous tip on the table, far more than his small meal warranted. "Your best," he said quietly, "is quite extraordinary. You should be very proud of your work ethic, young lady." He stood up, put on his coat, and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Sophie staring after him, a strange feeling of warmth spreading through her chest. It was the first kind word she had heard from a stranger all day. It was a small drop of humanity in an ocean of transactional smiles and brusque demands. That small act of recognition, more than the generous tip, gave her the final push she needed to get through the end of her shift, completely unaware of how those few quiet words were merely a prelude to a storm that was about to break. The clock on the kitchen wall read 12:45 a.m. The last of the side work was finally done. The salt and pepper shakers were filled, the silverware was polished, and the tables were set for the next day's service. Sophie moved like a ghost through the now silent dining room, her body screaming in protest with every step. The 16-hour shift was over. All that was left was to cash out her tips with Mr. Henderson and drag her exhausted body home. She found him in his small, cluttered office, hunched over a stack of receipts, his face illuminated by the harsh glare of a desk lamp. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and self-importance. "Mitchell," he said without looking up, "give me your checkout slips." Sophie handed them over her hand, trembling slightly from fatigue. She had done the math in her head. Even with the $60 deduction for the spilled steak, she had made decent tips. It had been a busy night, and her tireless service had paid off. It would be enough. It had to be. Henderson tallied the numbers with a swift, practiced cruelty. He counted out her cash tips, then paused. He looked up from the receipts, his expression turning from its usual sourness to one of grave theatrical seriousness. "There's a problem, Mitchell," he said, his voice dangerously low. A cold dread, heavier and more chilling than her exhaustion, washed over Sophie. "A problem. What is it?" "We're doing our end-of-night inventory reconciliation," he said, gesturing to a clipboard on his desk. "The bar is reporting a missing bottle of wine, a 2012 Chateau Margaux." Sophie's mind went blank. She knew the wine list. That bottle was kept in the locked cellar display. It was a trophy bottle worth over $2,000. "It's one of our most expensive bottles," Henderson continued, his eyes boring into her. "It can only be accessed with a manager's key. I personally retrieved it for the party at table 3 tonight. I opened it, poured the first glass, and left the bottle on their table as is customary. After they left, the bottle was gone." "Gone!" Sophie repeated, her tired brain struggling to catch up. Maybe the busboy cleared it by mistake. "The busboys are trained to leave all wine bottles," Henderson snapped. "We have questioned everyone. No one saw it. The table was in your section, Mitchell." The implication was as subtle as a sledgehammer. Sophie felt the blood drain from her face. "Mr. Henderson, what are you saying?" "I'm saying it's a very strange coincidence," he said, leaning back in his chair, a smug, predatory look on his face. "A $2,000 bottle of wine goes missing on the same night that one of my waitresses, who I know is struggling financially, works an exhausting double shift. A shift she practically begged me to let her work. People get tired. They make bad decisions. They get desperate." The accusation was so vile, so baseless, that it momentarily stunned Sophie into silence. He was twisting her act of kindness for Jenna into a motive for theft. "No," she finally whispered, shaking her head. "No, I would never. I didn't see any bottle. After they paid, I cleared the glasses, and the busboy cleared the plates. I never touched a wine bottle." "Your story has holes," Henderson said, tapping a pen on his desk. "You were tired. You were distracted. You spilled a $60 steak, a clear sign that you weren't on your game tonight. Perhaps you thought a bottle of wine wouldn't be missed. A quick sale for some easy cash." "That's not true." Sophie's voice rose, laced with indignation and disbelief. I have never stolen a single thing in my life. You can check the cameras." "Oh, we will," Henderson said with a thin, cruel smile. "But the camera angle on table 3 is partially obscured by a pillar. Convenient for you. Unfortunate for me." He stood up the picture of managerial authority. "Sophie Mitchell, given the circumstances and the value of the missing property, I have no choice but to suspend you without pay, effective immediately pending a full investigation." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Suspend me without pay, you can't." The panic was a tangible thing clawing its way up her throat. "I didn't do anything wrong. I need this job. My brother. Your personal issues are, as I have stated before, not my concern," he said, his voice cold and final. "My concern is the $2,000 hole in my inventory. I'll need you to hand over your apron and your key to the staff lockers. You will be escorted from the premises. We will be in touch." Tears of frustration and sheer helpless fury welled in Sophie's eyes. She was being framed. Henderson had found the ultimate excuse. He had always disliked her quiet competence, the way the customers seemed to genuinely like her. Perhaps he saw her as a threat, or perhaps he was simply a bully who enjoyed exercising his petty power. She didn't know the reason. All she knew was that her world was collapsing. She had covered a shift for a friend in need. She had worked 16 agonizing hours. She had endured a painful burn and his constant verbal abuse, and this was her reward, an accusation of grand theft, a suspension that was, in effect, a termination. Numbly, she untied the soiled apron. The $60 in cash, tips her rightful earnings for the night, sat on his desk, now evidence in his twisted narrative. He wouldn't even let her have that. She placed her locker key on the desk and turned to leave her dignity, the only thing she had left. As she walked through the dark, empty restaurant, a security guard following a few paces behind her, she felt a profound sense of injustice. The beautiful bistro with its polished wood and soft lighting now felt like a prison. Every chair, every table was a silent witness to her humiliation. She stepped out into the cold night air, the city lights blurring through her tears. The bus had stopped running for the night. She didn't have money for a cab. It was a 3-mile walk home. As she began the long, lonely walk, each step was a painful reminder of her failure. She hadn't just lost a job. She had lost Leo's lifeline. The weight of his medical bills, the rent, the future, it all came crashing down on her. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a sharp, terrifying clarity. She was at the breaking point. She had tried so hard to do the right thing, to be a good person, and for what? To be thrown out onto the street, branded a thief. Kindness, it seemed, was a luxury she could no longer afford. 2 days passed in a haze of anxiety and despair. Sophie's suspension felt like a sentence, the silence from the restaurant, a constant ringing indictment. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Mr. Henderson's smug face, heard his baseless accusations. She spent her time poring over job listings online, the knot in her stomach, tightening with every application she sent into the void. The emergency fund was nearly gone, and Leo had a follow-up appointment with his specialist next week. The copay alone was a mountain she no longer had the tools to climb. She tried her best to hide the severity of the situation from Leo plastering on a brave face and claiming the restaurant had simply cut her hours for a few days. But he was perceptive. He saw the new worry lines etched around her eyes and the way she just pushed food around her plate at dinner. Jenna had been calling and texting incessantly, her messages a torrent of guilt and fury. "This is my fault," she wrote. "I'm going to go to him, Sophie. I'll tell him he can fire me instead. This is wrong." Sophie had to talk her down, insisting that it would do no good. Henderson wouldn't care. He would likely just fire them both. On the third morning, a Tuesday, her phone rang. The caller ID read, "The Gilded Spoon." Her heart leapt into her throat. This was it. The verdict. It wasn't Mr. Henderson's voice on the other end, but a crisp, professional female voice she didn't recognize. "Is this Sophie Mitchell?" "Yes, this is she." Sophie answered her own voice, barely a whisper. "Name? My name is Catherine. I'm the executive assistant to the ownership group. You are requested to attend a meeting this morning at 10 o'clock at our corporate headquarters downtown. Please come to the 50th floor of the Beaumont Tower." The Beaumont Tower, the gleaming obsidian skyscraper that dominated the city's skyline. Sophie had only ever admired it from the street below. A meeting. "What is this about?" she asked, bewildered. "It is regarding your employment status," Catherine said, her tone leaving no room for questions. "A car will be at your address in 30 minutes to pick you up." The line went dead. Sophie stared at her phone, her mind reeling. Corporate headquarters. A car. This was far more serious than a simple firing. They were probably going to press charges. The idea of facing a lawsuit from a massive corporation was terrifying. She dressed in her only professional outfit, a simple black dress and a worn cardigan. She felt small and powerless, like a lamb being led to the slaughter. The car, a sleek black town car, arrived precisely on time. The silent, surreal ride downtown only amplified her anxiety. The Beaumont Tower lobby was a cathedral of marble and glass. Sophie gave her name to the security desk, and a guard escorted her to a private elevator. The ride to the 50th floor was dizzyingly fast. When the doors opened, she stepped into a world of quiet, understated luxury. The receptionist, a poised woman with a warm smile, led her down a hallway lined with impressive modern art to a large corner office. The office was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a breathtaking, godlike view of the entire city. Mr. Henderson was already there, standing near the window looking smug and self-assured. He gave Sophie a look of pure contempt as she entered. Behind a massive mahogany desk sat a man she didn't recognize, impeccably dressed in a tailored grey suit. But it wasn't him who held her attention. Sitting in one of the plush leather chairs in front of the desk, holding a simple ceramic mug of coffee, was the old man from the corner booth. Mr. Ed. He was no longer wearing his worn tweed jacket. He was in a perfectly fitted navy blue suit, his white hair neatly combed, his pale blue eyes clear and sharp. He looked at Sophie, and for the first time she didn't see a sad, lonely old man. She saw power. She saw authority. He gave her a small, reassuring smile and gestured to the empty chair beside him. "Miss Mitchell, please have a seat," he said. His voice was the same soft, kind voice she remembered, but now it resonated with an unshakable confidence that filled the enormous room. Sophie sat down, her legs feeling weak. She looked from the old man to Mr. Henderson, her confusion mounting. "What is this?" Henderson demanded, his tone losing some of its edge. "Who is this man? I was told this meeting was with Mr. Beaumont." The old man took a slow sip of his coffee. He placed the mug down on a coaster with a quiet click. He then looked directly at Henderson, his gentle demeanor evaporating, replaced by a gaze as cold and hard as steel. "I am Edward Beaumont," he said simply. The silence that followed was absolute. The color drained from Henderson's face. He looked as if he had been struck by lightning. Edward Beaumont, the reclusive, semi-retired billionaire founder and owner of the Beaumont Hospitality Group, which owned dozens of five-star hotels, and as its first-ever acquisition, one charming bistro called the Gilded Spoon. He was a legend in the industry, but so private that few knew what he even looked like. Mr. Beaumont. Sir. Henderson stammered, his posture deflating. I had no idea. I apologize. If I had known who you were—" "That is precisely the point, David," Mr. Beaumont said, his voice cutting through Henderson's pathetic apologies. "You shouldn't have to know who I am. You are supposed to treat every customer with respect, and more importantly, you are supposed to treat your staff with dignity. You have failed spectacularly on both counts." Beaumont turned his attention to Sophie. "Miss Mitchell, I was at your restaurant for nearly 10 hours on Friday. I wasn't just there for the oatmeal. My late wife Eleanor and I had our first date at the Gilded Spoon 45 years ago, before I owned it, when it was just a little neighborhood diner. I go back every year on our anniversary to remember her. This year I saw something that would have made her both incredibly proud and deeply ashamed." He looked back at Henderson. "I saw this young woman work a 16-hour shift, not for greed, but to help a colleague, a single mother, who you were threatening to fire over a sick child. I saw her handle a difficult family with a level of grace and compassion that cannot be taught. I saw her suffer a painful burn and continue her work without a single complaint. And then I saw you, David, berate her and illegally dock her pay for an accident." Henderson was sweating now, his face a mottled red. "Sir, the wine, the missing bottle. It was a $2,000 loss. I had to take it seriously." "Ah, yes. The wine," Beaumont said, a flicker of a smile touching his lips. He pressed a button on the intercom on the desk. "Catherine, could you bring it in, please?" A moment later, the executive assistant entered, carrying a bottle of 2012 Chateau Margaux. She placed it on the desk. Henderson stared at it, dumbfounded. "But how? It seems the wealthy gentleman at table 3, a Mr. Peterson from the accounting firm across the street, enjoyed the wine so much he decided to take the empty bottle home as a souvenir." Beaumont explained, his voice dripping with irony. "An idiotic move on his part, certainly, but a simple phone call to him which I made myself on Saturday morning cleared it right up. He was deeply embarrassed and apologetic. A phone call you apparently never bothered to make, David. You were too eager to find a scapegoat." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the room. "But here is the most interesting part. I asked my security team to review the full surveillance footage from that night. As you noted, the camera on table 3 is partially obscured. But the camera from the bar has a clear view of your office door. It shows you, David, carrying the empty Chateau Margaux bottle from the dining room, not to the trash, but into your office about 10 minutes before you accused Miss Mitchell of stealing it." Beaumont leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. "You manufactured the entire crisis. You hid the empty bottle and invented a theft to get rid of an employee you personally disliked. You didn't just fail as a manager. You are a petty, cruel man and a liability to my company." Henderson stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish, no sounds coming out. His carefully constructed world had been utterly demolished in less than 5 minutes. Edward Beaumont looked at him with finality. "Your employment with Beaumont Hospitality is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. My legal team will be in touch regarding your severance, or lack thereof." As security guards entered and quietly led the utterly broken and defeated David Henderson out of the office, Sophie sat in stunned silence, trying to process the dizzying turn of events. The powerful man, the billionaire owner of everything, turned to her. The hardness in his eyes was gone, replaced once again by the quiet kindness she had first seen in the man in the corner booth. "Now then, Miss Mitchell," Edward Beaumont said gently, "you and I have something much more important to discuss." With Henderson gone, the tension in the room dissipated, replaced by a quiet, contemplative atmosphere. The grand city skyline, once a symbol of an unreachable world, now seemed like a simple backdrop to this life-altering conversation. Sophie felt as though she were in a dream, her mind struggling to reconcile the quiet Mr. Ed with the powerful Edward Beaumont sitting before her. "I owe you an apology, Miss Mitchell," Beaumont began, his voice softening. "You were subjected to an appalling experience in one of my establishments. What you endured was a failure of management and a failure of our corporate culture. For that, I am truly sorry." "You don't have to apologize, sir," Sophie said, finding her voice at last. You saved my job. You saved me." "I merely brought the truth to light," he corrected gently. "You saved yourself with your character. I just happened to be there to witness it." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "I did a little research after Friday night. I hope you don't mind. I know about your brother Leo, and I know about his medical condition." Sophie's heart clenched with a familiar protective fear. "He's a good kid. He's strong. We're managing." "I have no doubt," Beaumont said with a nod. "But you shouldn't have to manage. You shouldn't have to work yourself to the point of collapse just to afford basic care for your family. That is not a system I wish to be a part of." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "My wife Eleanor passed away from a long illness 2 years ago. We had access to the best doctors, the best treatments in the world. Money was never an object, but I saw firsthand how this industry, the healthcare industry, can crush families who don't have those resources. I saw the fear in the eyes of other patients in the waiting rooms. It changes you." He looked at Sophie, his eyes filled with a deep personal empathy. "What I saw in you on Friday, that wasn't just good service. It was integrity. It was compassion in the face of adversity. It was putting another person's needs, Jenna's the family with the children, before your own, even at great personal cost. That is rarer than any vintage of wine, Miss Mitchell, and it is far more valuable." He picked up a pen from his desk, turning it over in his fingers. "Therefore, I am not just reinstating your employment. That would be an insult. I am making you a 2-part offer." Sophie held her breath. "First," he said, "the Beaumont Foundation. My family's philanthropic arm will be taking over the full financial responsibility for Leo's medical care. All of it. From his current treatments to any future procedures he may require, including a transplant if it becomes necessary. We will arrange for him to be seen by Dr. Annabelle Cole at the foremost nephrology clinic in the country. You will not have to worry about another medical bill for your brother ever again." The words struck Sophie with the force of a physical wave. She couldn't breathe. Tears streamed down her face, not of sadness or frustration, but of a relief so profound it was painful. The mountain of debt, the constant suffocating weight of fear that had been her companion for years, suddenly vanished. The future, which had been a terrifying dark wall, was now blasted open with light. I don't know what to say," she stammered, covering her mouth with her hand. "Thank you. That word isn't big enough." "It's the least I can do," Beaumont said, his voice thick with emotion. "It is what Eleanor would have wanted." He allowed her a moment to compose herself before continuing. "The second part of the offer concerns you, Sophie. Henderson's departure leaves a vacancy for general manager at the Gilded Spoon. The position is yours if you want it." He held up a hand as she started to protest. "I know what you're thinking, that you don't have the experience. But I disagree. You have more experience in what truly matters than he ever did. However, I think we can do better." He slid a folder across the desk towards her. "What I saw on Friday was a systemic problem. A manager who ruled by fear, employees who were terrified to call in sick, a culture of intimidation. It is likely happening in other locations as well. I have been too disconnected from the day-to-day reality of my own company. You, on the other hand, have lived it. Sophie opened the folder. Inside was a job description for a newly created position. Director of Employee Welfare and Training, Beaumont Hospitality Group. I'm creating this role for you, Beaumont explained. You would report directly to me. Your job would be to travel to our restaurants and hotels to observe, to speak with the staff, not as a corporate inspector, but as one of them. You would help us develop new training programs focused on empathy, integrity, and employee support. You would help us identify and nurture good managers and root out the bad ones. You would be the conscience of this company. You would be responsible for ensuring that no other employee ever has to endure what you did. Sophie stared at the paper, the words blurring through her tears. Director. Report directly to him. The salary listed at the bottom was a number so large she couldn't even comprehend it. It was more money than she had ever dreamed of making in a decade, let alone a year. It wasn't just a reward. It was a reckoning. It was a chance to fix the very system that had almost broken her. It was a position born from her worst day, a testament to the idea that her quiet acts of kindness hadn't been invisible after all. "Why me?" she asked, her voice choked with emotion. "Because you didn't do it for a reward, Sophie," Beaumont said, his voice resonating with absolute certainty. "You did it because it was the right thing to do. You covered for Jenna knowing it could get you in trouble. You showed patience to that family, knowing they probably wouldn't be big tippers. You endured Henderson's abuse without sacrificing your dignity. You possess a strength of character that cannot be bought or taught. I am not giving you a gift. I am making a strategic investment in the soul of my company. So what do you say?" Sophie looked out the window at the sprawling city below. For the first time, it didn't look intimidating. It looked full of promise. She thought of Leo, free from the shadow of his illness. She thought of Jenna, secure in her job. She thought of all the other waiters and bus boys and hostesses working their own grueling shifts. She could help them. She could make a real difference. She looked back at Edward Beaumont, the man who had seen her at her lowest, and was now offering her the sky. A genuine smile, the first truly carefree smile in years, spread across her face. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Yes, Mr. Beaumont. I accept." 6 months later, Sophie's world had been remade. As the new director of employee welfare, she traveled to Beaumont Properties not as an executive, but as a former colleague who understood the struggles of the staff. With Edward Beaumont's full support, she instituted systemic changes, including an emergency paid leave policy that ensured no one would ever have to choose between a sick child and a paycheck. The culture of fear was slowly being replaced by one of respect. The most profound change was for Leo. Under the care of the nation's top specialist, his health was transformed. Free from the shadow of his illness, he was now excitedly planning for a future at a university, his place secured by a Beaumont Foundation scholarship. One autumn afternoon, Sophie returned to the Gilded Spoon. The restaurant felt lighter, more alive. Jenna Martinez, now the general manager, greeted her with a fierce, joyful hug. "It's a different place, Sophie," Jenna said, her voice filled with a new confidence. "People are happy. They aren't afraid anymore. You did that." After talking with Jenna, Sophie saw him in the corner booth. Edward Beaumont sat with his coffee, no longer an anonymous observer, but a trusted mentor. She slid into the seat opposite him. Eleanor would have loved you, he said, quietly looking around the bustling room. She always believed that the true measure of a person is how they treat those they have power over. You passed that test when you didn't even know you were being watched. I just did what I thought was right, Sophie replied simply. And that, Beaumont said, his pale blue eyes meeting hers with profound respect, is why you are sitting here today. You didn't change for the job, Sophie. You are changing the job. Looking around the happy, thriving restaurant, Sophie knew he was right. The reward was never just the title or the security. It was the chance to turn her own hardship into a source of compassion for others. The longest, worst night of her life hadn't broken her. It had forged her purpose, proving that a single unseen act of kindness could ripple outward and change everything. Sophie Mitchell's story is a powerful reminder that our true character is revealed not in the spotlight, but in the quiet, unobserved moments of our lives. It's in the decision to help a friend when we're already exhausted, to show kindness when we're met with cruelty, and to hold on to our integrity when it feels like the world is trying to strip it away. We may never know who is watching. It might not be a billionaire in a corner booth, but life has a way of rewarding authenticity and compassion in the most unexpected ways. Her story proves that you don't need wealth or status to change the world. Sometimes all it takes is one person choosing to do the right thing, no matter the cost. If this story resonated with you and reminded you of the power of kindness, please take a moment to hit the like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that inspire and uplift. Your support helps us continue to find and share these incredible tales. Thank you for watching.